Hello, I'm Bob Geller. Welcome to PR Dun and Dunner. We have a great guest today. He's a best-selling author, longtime journalist, and a founding partner of Category Design Advisors. And he's written not one, but two books on the topic we are here to discuss, that is category design. And now he is a second-time guest here. Welcome back to the podcast, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good, Bob. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again. I circled back with you not long ago, and I learned you had a new book coming out, which was exciting. I wondered what have could have been new because the first book was very comprehensive. And I read it, got a copy here, really enjoyed it.
Right. There you go.
And I get it. I mean, I understand why you wrote the second book. I guess I'd like to hear from you about that. But I would say one thing it did was help fill in the blanks because we've been out of touch for a few years, and you had some actual case studies from your work,
That was part of it. Yeah, yeah.
which was very cool. So let's start from the beginning because not everybody here may remember our first chat or might not know about you and your work. I'll just say generally, if it's not obvious from my opening comments, that this is about engineering markets, categories, and from there, I'll hand it off to you and ask you to tell us what you mean when you talk about category design.
Yeah, sure. So Play Bigger was a book that came out in 2016, 10 years ago, amazingly. And wrote it with three other guys, Al Ramadan, Dave Peterson, and Chris Lockhead. And we were the ones who essentially proposed this idea, this concept of category design, and described it and ended up popularizing it because that book has sold like hundreds of thousands of copies and infiltrated the tech ecosphere and but at its basic level, look, the companies that we recognize that really changed something that and created the most value for the most part are companies that identified something new that didn't exist before, and framed it in a certain way and owned it over time. And we can cite like obvious names we know, like, Uber creating the whole concept of
Yep.
ride hailing, or Airbnb creating this whole concept. I mean, again, versions of these things might have existed before, but nobody actually solidified a category that actually stuck in people's minds. And so we set out with Play Bigger to essentially reverse engineer, like, how did the greats who did this, what did they do? Uh, With the idea that if you're a company leader or a company founder, if those are the kinds of companies that create the most value, that have the most impact, attract investors, really please customers, then why wouldn't you want to do everything in your power to be with that company instead of being the third follower, or the somebody who grabs 5% market share or something of some other category? And so how do we describe how you think about that, and how you go about that? And we came up with this concept that these great companies literally would not only identify a new category that the world needed to exist, but design it so that it was in their favor, right? To actually engineer, as you use the word, that category, not just the product or the company. And so Play Bigger was a book that basically was the why. It was like, how what category design is and why these companies were so successful doing it. And it really lit people on fire about like the idea that we should do this category design thing. But then we ended up, me and my business partner, essentially practicing category design by working with some 50 odd companies over the past 10 years. And as you can imagine, first of all, we learned a whole lot about what works and doesn't, because we were actually in the field doing this stuff in real time. But also, as we did that, we started studying categories and concepts of category design, and coming up with new ideas and new ways to think this stuff through. And all of what has been effective in the field, so essentially like 10 years of field research, is what gets packaged up in this new book, the category
Mm.
creation formula. So if you think of Play Bigger was kind of like, what is category design and why would you want to do it? The new book, the category creation formula, is like, here's the playbook, here's the how, step by step. You could actually, follow the book and do it for yourself.
I love it. There are so many examples and actionable tips. And the examples are fun, interesting, accessible. Everything from the notable successes you mentioned to ones you'd never imagine would go in a book like this, like the knuckleball and monster trucks,
Yeah,
viewed through a category lens. So that's really interesting. But you said play bigger 10 years ago. That's a long time. Is another reason has the practice changed? Is it harder these days to play bigger?
no, it's not. It's well, in fact, so rewind one thing here. So this new book is called The Category Creation Formula, and this gets to answering your question. But we ended up coming up with this thinking tool that ended up being maybe the single most effective thing that we use when we're trying to talk to companies and help them get to some place where they see this new category to create. And so we kept working on trying to find something, you could just quickly write up on a whiteboard and get people talking. And we've kind of boiled it down into this very simple formula that is three parts. It's context, and I'll explain each one for a second. Context plus missing plus innovation gives you a new insight into a new market category opportunity. So, um, context is what's changing around your target audience. What's new that's really creating new problems that they never had before, or for that matter, are there new technologies or new situations out there that are creating new ways to solve an old problem that didn't exist before? But we want to really understand that context, what's going on around your target audience. Because if you really understand that context and really do a deep dive, you can start to see what's missing today in this new context. Like what's a problem that this context is creating that needs to be solved, or what is this, as I said, just said, a context creates a new way to solve some old problem. If you see that missing, it becomes pretty easy to see the innovation you can create to solve for that missing in this new context. And if you put all those pieces together, what you're essentially seeing is something that doesn't yet exist that should exist. In other words, a new category opportunity to create. Now, we could talk more about that, but just to jump to your question about what's going on today, the more change there is in context, the more opportunity is there down the equation to create new market categories
Um,
because the more the change there is, the more opportunity there is. And we're in like one of the greatest, I mean, in my, whatever, 6+ decades of life that I've
Me
seen,
too.
right? I mean, AI is changing everything about the way businesses think about business and products. We have wars that are going on in a world order that's changing. Um, you know, Supply chains are all disrupted. I mean, it's an enormous amount of change. And so I would say it's actually easier right now to see new category opportunities than there ever was before. The flip side to that is because of AI, it's also easier to chase those opportunities than it's ever been before with less money and fewer people and less time. So I would say the
Why is
amount of
that?
time,
Just out of curiosity, how does AI do that?
well, I mean, because you can just look at if you're creating a digital product, being able to code it,
Oh, okay.
use,
Time to
Claude Code,
market.
whatever. You need less engineers, you need less
Right,
money to
right,
fund
right,
it
right,
up in the
right.
first place.
That
So
makes
I would
sense.
say there's more opportunity than ever and less time to claim that opportunity than ever.
Interesting. Well, let me throw another challenge at you, and I'll start with a bigger
Sorry for the
challenge.
long answer there.
No, it was a good answer. It was good. It leads to, of course, as these things do, to other questions. But we always counseled as a PR firm because sometimes we get involved with strategy PR and positioning and messaging
Mhm.
that don't chase a new category, create a new category unless you have to because it's expensive. People like to buy what they know or they understand. It takes time. Um, so let's fast forward to today. And the variables you mentioned do exist. There's no question. Rapid change creates opportunity. Also, I'd argue it creates challenge because there's more competition for attention, more noise. It's harder to grab that attention. So I'm wondering how that affects what you do. I'm imagining well, first of all, let's go to funding, right? You talked about in your book going as early as the pitch decks to for a VC, and I guess factoring this category idea into your pitches. I think is a great idea. Do these play bigger strategies inevitably require more money or more funding than other kinds of go to market?
Um, so I think there's probably three different things in your
Yes,
question to
so
address.
is it, well, first, is it more of a challenge today? Do you need more money generally?
No, let's go back to the beginning
Okay.
here. So, first of all, it is absolutely easier and safer to go into a category that exists and try to take some market share from some existing players. And thousands of companies do that and are reasonably successful or very successful companies, right? Because then when you're doing PR, you're describing it, marketing, whatever, people know what you're addressing. There's an addressable market to talk to, all those kinds of things, right? So that's is the easier path. There's a small subset of companies that want to take the hard path and actually create something new because that's the bigger payoff. I mean, it's harder to do, but ultimately, if you do it successfully, it's the much bigger payoff. So, category design and what we do is really aimed at that subset of founders who want to chase that bigger opportunity. Um, so you had another question about going in front of venture capitalists or in front of
Right.
investors.
I mean, you have to sell. I'd imagine one of the bigger challenges of category design is getting everyone you need to on board. You say, I think the CEO should drive the effort, but of course, the board may be interested, the VCs who are funding you, maybe they have to write a bigger check, I don't know, to underwrite this kind of initiative. Um, so yeah, I mean, we talked about VCs. What was your
Yeah,
point
yeah.
there?
So first of all, yeah, I mean, look, it probably does take a bigger investment to be able to chase a new market category if you're really gonna do it. But you also have a chance of getting more funding and bigger investment. What we ended up discovering about because we work with venture capitalists a lot in our work, and what we discovered about the really good ones, the ones who really like are shooting for the home runs, you go in and pitch them, and mo I think most companies think we want to tell them about our team and our product, right? So the first couple of slides are, here's what our thing is that we created, and here's, this impressive team that's going to do this thing. Actually, that's not what the VCs want to listen for first, or the really good ones, the home run VCs, right? They're sitting there listening for, is this company describing to me an opportunity to create an important new market category? So when a company goes in front of a really good venture capitalist, what they're looking for is, what they're listening for first is an epiphany about a category they didn't know, they hadn't thought about before, that's going to be a really big and important one, right? So that's the first layer of what they're listening for. This company is describing something and their VC is going, holy shit, that's really got to exist in the world, right? That's the first layer. The second layer is then if I believe that this category is really going to be significant and I want to be in on it, are these people sitting in front of me the ones who are going to pull it off? Because a VC can't invest in competing companies in the same category, right?
Right.
So the last thing that VC wants to do is see a really cool opportunity for creating a new category and look across at the company there and saying, but I don't believe they're going to be the ones to pull it off. Then they're going to say, dismiss that company and say, I'm going to go find the ones who are. What this tells you if you're a company that's trying to, pitch VCs is pitch them on the category first. Describe what this thing is needs to be and why the world needs it, and then why you're qualified to pull it off. And then like what, okay, now let me show you the actual product that's going to do it, which is backwards from the way most companies pitch to venture capitalists. And by doing it that way, um, you're likely to get a bigger round of investment or bigger support from investors than you are the other way around.
Yeah, and I imagine if you sell it in that early like that, then you have the board on your side and the VCs and hopefully get the executive team.
Yeah.
together and to rally and to embrace it and to support you in that effort.
Oh,
Um,
and by the way, too, when you're hiring, I mean, the best talent wants to work for those kinds of companies
yeah,
that are actually doing something new and exciting. They don't, the best people don't really want to work for the third or fourth place company that's making something that's 20% cheaper than somebody else.
yeah, they don't want to pick up crumbs. They want to get that home run, right?
Right, exactly.
Um, Getting back to the formula, you mentioned context. It occurred to me as I was reading your book that do all new categories really emerge out of a context or a need? I'm thinking of things like the router from Cisco or the PC that didn't necessarily arise out of a need. It create, or correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think it did?
So there's the brilliant sort of impact of the idea that of telling people about a problem they didn't know they had. And so personal computer would be a good example of that, right? I mean, before PCs, computers were something that we didn't really touch, right? They were in the back room of, some big, mainframes in some big company. And so, we would never, th individuals never thought like, hey, I really want a computer on my desk at home or in my office. But once the PC started to create this space in people's minds that said, oh, but if you had one of those, here's all these things you could do that you can't do any other way. Then it starts to create that feeling of there's a missing. Yes, I do need that thing. Um, we tell the story oftentimes in sessions. The brilliant example of creating that sense of missing out of nothing. Steve Jobs was great at this, right?
Yes.
And so you go back to 2011 when Jobs introduced the iPad, and when he got up on stage, and there had been tablets before that, but tablets had always been like Microsoft made a tablet. It was basically a laptop with a screen on that you could write on, right? That's the way they envisioned it, right? Like, so Jobs gets on stage and said, and they'd never been successful. So Jobs gets on stage and he says, "Look, 2011, we are now entering an age when all the media you consume is going to be digital. You're going to watch movies on digital devices, you're going to listen to music, read books, everything's going to be on digital devices." So he's got a screen behind him and he puts up an image of the iPhone and he says, you've got this phone. It's a great thing, this iPhone. Um, and you could do all those things on it, but it's got this really small screen. So it's really going to suck watching a movie or a
Yes.
baseball game. And then he puts up another image on the other side of a laptop, of a Mac. It says, you got this wonderful Mac. And it might be great for watching a movie or a baseball game, but it's really going to suck if you're trying to read a book on the beach or listen to music while you're walking around. And so then he puts up and he says, so what he's done in that sense is he's set up the context of a changing time, digital media, and he set up this idea that there's something missing we didn't even know was missing, which is the right device to listen to or to consume that media on. Didn't even occur to us before. But now he's kind of put that in our minds. And then he puts up on the screen in between those two things and says, we're now creating a new category of digital device. Ours is called the iPad. And now let me tell you what it does. And so that's a perfect example of this idea of creating a missing out of the context that people didn't maybe realize yet.
Yeah, a master class in category creation. We can all learn from that. I'm not sure if you finished the formula. You started with context, and then what are the other parts of it?
Well, missing is the second one. So
Missing.
amid the context and seeing what's missing. And if you see those two things clearly, then it becomes pretty easy to see the innovation to create to solve for that missing in this new context. And
Mm.
if by the way, if you've thought it out that way, you've now already essentially thought out the story that you can go to market with, because it's a very effective way to go to market with by saying to your potential customers, "Hey, look, I understand what's going on in your life. I understand the context around you, what's changing, what's making you frustrated, or what you're really pissed off about." If you can describe that to somebody and make them go like, "Okay, yeah, you really understand," and then be able to say, and in that context, here's the problem that's not getting solved. Here's what's missing in your life. And by that point in time, if you do that really well, your potential customer is going, okay, I get it, that's true about the context, and that is the problem I have. And then if you can turn around and say, here's the innovation that actually can exist today, that never existed before, that can solve for that problem and this missing, you've got them now, right? They're you're it's not like you're trying to sell them at that point. You've actually brought them into your camp. And then to be able to say, and okay, now let me show you our product and why, we're the ones who bring this to market. And by that point in time, they're like, tell me more, right? Not, and it doesn't feel like the opposite, which is when you go into a sales call and say, here's this product, let me show it to you. And you're going like, what do I need that for?
Exactly. That got reminds me of our earlier conversation. We talked about press releases and how they typically aren't framed correctly. They start with bits, bytes, speeds, feeds, features, not solving problems, not taking this kind of category or context approach.
Yep.
Um, I wanted to, you talked about going to market, which of course for me and the audience here, I think is particularly interesting because we love to talk about marketing, branding, PR.
Mhm.
And I guess one thing well, first of all, one thing I noticed in your new book is that you did add a couple of new elements to the outbound communication side, not just lightning strikes anymore, but heartbeats.
Mhm.
And I think you can't argue with me that it's harder to get noticed out there. It's harder to get attention. It's harder to influence people. That's why Hollywood bets on established franchises, reboots. Again, people like to buy what they know. It's a quicker way to their wallet. But you've educated us about that it's worth the challenge and that category kings do very well in the categories. It's good to be king. So I guess the question is, looking at bringing the new category to market, let's say you're not a company with billions in funding, you're a B2B niche B2B tech company. And you do have examples like that in your book, which I for sure appreciated that. Yeah, being harder to break through generally. What's your answer to that, especially for a company that have a lavish budgets? What if you threw that party, that new category party, and nobody came? I don't know. Talk to us about the playbook for bringing your new category to market in ways that work today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. There's lots and lots of noise, but there's always been lots and lots of noise.
Mm,
I mean, it's all relative. People, have gotten used to various kinds of noise. I mean,
true,
if you go back to
true.
the old recent Trout book positioning, I mean, they're talking about TV and all the noise that people are getting, in those days. This is before the internet even existed, right?
I love recent trout, by the way, and a category design kind of reminds me of them because they said there's typically one brand that takes the spoils, and you have the second brand maybe,
Yep.
and then some real small, followers.
Oh
But
yeah,
anyway,
we were, look, I mean, we totally acknowledge we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and recent Trout was a big influence. Jeff Moore's Crossing the Chasm was an
sure,
influence.
sure,
There were a
classics.
lot of great Ogilvy on advertising. I mean, there was a lot of greats that we studied as we started to work on this project. Um, but so so yes, I mean, first of all, to answer one of your questions, Play Bigger emphasizes this idea of a lightning strike, which is a, one single concentrated huge effort that, tries to blow out um, and get a lot of attention all at once, which can sometimes be a worthwhile example. But as we've discovered over the years, that what really matters is not only doing those big things, but really being constant with your message out there. Whether it's on social media these days, I mean, TV, whatever, the path you want to do, right? But yeah, we call it heartbeats, which is just this constant beat of being out there with a message. But we also we really try to emphasize with our companies to we use an example of Jeff Bezos and Amazon.com. And so, in 1994, 95, when he founds Amazon and the internet's a new thing, and people at that point weren't even, willing to put a credit card on the internet. Um, he already had a vision of this idea you could sell everything on over the internet. You could create the everything store. But that like trying to get that message out to everybody and be in everything at a time when there was only a small fraction of people who really were comfortable with the internet
Right.
was the wrong way to go, right? That he knew that.
Mhm.
He was very smart about that. So driving across the country with his wife, then wife, trying to Henry from New York to Seattle and trying to figure out what to do on this internet thing. And they're making lists and he's studying like all the kinds of things you could sell on the internet. And he realizes that there's one kind of product that you really couldn't buy like with a catalog or anything like that that had millions and millions of SKUs, but only your local store is going to only carry like 20,000 of them. And that was books. And so he understood that there was a small niche that would truly understand the value of having a place where you could order any book and get it at the time, if you remember, like within a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Um, Book lovers who couldn't find the book that they wanted in their local bookstore. And so he went out at first with this concept of a bookstore that he had a much narrower audience to reach,
Right.
and much more targeted, and they would feel the message much more powerfully than somebody if you were trying to tell them to buy clothes or something on the internet. And so and then he establishes that foothold and then moves out from there. When we have clients who are trying to do something with a small team that's too big or tries to reach too broad an audience, we'll often have this conversation. Our phrase will end up being, "What's your bookstore?"
Uh,
We need to find your bookstore today, which is the thing
yeah.
that you can pull off that a
Right.
particular audience is going to understand, that you have the capability and power to address that audience without trying to spend everything and be everywhere. Establish that foothold, and then let's build on that from piece by piece. And that's generally the advice I would give to any startup.
I appreciate that. I won't ask you to go through the entire playbook because there's a lot of different pieces to this. But and by the way, the latest book, has a very good step-by-step approach, almost like a workbook approach. But I would say if you could just share with the audience now the top two or three things to keep in mind when you're trying to do this with your team, whether you hire somebody like category design advisors or do it, on your own. What are the two or three most important parts of the process, would you say?
Well, so we literally wrote this book with the idea that we wanted to like give people a way to do it themselves. I mean, we have a practice obviously but we can only work for, 5 companies a year because, it's just me and my business partner. We like it being a very bespoke business. And we charge a decent amount of money. So like, not everybody can do that. We have something on our website called Office Hours, that is a free 30-minute call with us. We talk to like 20 companies a
Oh,
month,
wow, that's a good
um,
idea.
that call in and just want to talk about category design. And I would say that 80+% of them are bootstrap startups that couldn't possibly afford to do this with us. And after years and years of doing that, we wanted to write this book for them so that they could actually like pull some version of this off by themselves. And so there is a step-by-step process in the book. And a couple of the things that I would say are really important. So that category formula is to put it up on a whiteboard and get your leadership team, or if you're really small, everybody in the company around a table and really have that conversation. It's not a conversation most companies have, right? Most companies are, we have this product idea, our heads down and get some engineers here and to build this product, and then we're going to go out and try to find a way to market and find an audience that wants it. This is making you do it in a reverse way of sitting down with your team and really discussing the audience you want to address, what's happening to them, and what they really need, and then trying to build a product that fits the need that you see out there versus the other way around. Um, and so one of the things we say is put that formula up on a whiteboard and have that conversation. It's probably not a conversation you've ever had with your team.
You probably sat in on some knockdown dragouts, have you?
I wouldn't say knockdown dragouts, but I mean, look, you know, most of the time, if you get, as we've discovered, if you get a team of 6 or 8 people that are running a company in a room, and you ask those 6 or 8 people to tell exactly what the company does and where it's going, you'll get 6 or 8 different answers. They're not wildly divergent, but part of the process of doing this is to try to bring all of that together so that there's one team focus.
I guess all the better if you have that vision in mind from the outset, like we were talking about before, and you sell it in, and it's easier to get people to rally around it. But I know personally, being involved with C-suite folks and marketing leaders, getting a small group to agree, even just a set of messages versus an overarching category, can be a challenge.
Well,
Um,
that's why somebody like you or me is helpful from because you come in from the
yes,
outside
exactly.
and you can say, hey, that's not going to fly, or I mean, you can say things that the internal team can't say.
It's like herding cats, and like you say in your book, you can't phone it in. I mean, it's better to sit down, get in that conference room, just get it done,
Yeah, yeah, and do it in person.
hammer it out. That's what I'm saying. Do it in person. I don't want to keep you too long. Is there anything I haven't asked you, or anything you want to share as final thoughts, Kevin?
Well, so just because you brought it up earlier, and it's actually one of my favorite stories in the book is about the knuckleball in baseball, right?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
But it actually had a purpose because
But that was a
it,
failure, wasn't it? That was that a category
well, yeah,
flop?
well, yeah. So, going back to this whole conversation, right? Having that conversation about context missing innovation, it helps you make sure that what you're going to see as the product you want to build is something that actually is needed, right? That the market will likely want. Um, and there are so many examples out there in the world of companies building a product that is a maybe a terrific product, works really well by any, stretch of it, that just doesn't have a people don't care about it. Like it just doesn't go anywhere. I mean, you think of like, one great example of that was the Segway, right? The Segway scooter.
Yes.
Miracle of engineering. And
Talk about something overhyped, by the way. That was
right,
crazy.
but it's builders and investors all believed that it was going to change the world. It was going to change the way cities work.
Mm.
And then it ends up being something that, that mall cops ride around in.
It's like a punchline.
It's a punchline. And so I've always liked, sometimes when you bring in a story from a completely different context outside of business, that it can help you see something. So I told the story in the book about uh, the knuckleball pitch. So um, if you go through the list of all the knuckleball pitchers that have ever been in the major leagues, 12% of them are in the Hall of Fame. The number of
Is that a lot or a little?
So the number of all, if you take all of the major leaguers who have ever played, 2% are in the Hall of Fame. So that tells you basically that there's something that, the Hall of Fame pitchers are actually extremely successful. I mean, knuckleball pitchers are extremely successful. And there's a lot of really good things about the product of the knuckleball. Like, for instance, a really good knuckleball pitcher can pitch more often because it's not a strain on their arm. Good knuckleball pitchers can pitch into their 40s. So there's obviously a lot of really good things about this product called the knuckleball. And
But
yet, today in the major leagues, there is not one knuckleball pitcher on a roster, on a major league roster. So why is that? Well, if you go back and you look at what's evolved over the last, couple of decades in baseball, is there's been an extreme bent toward 100-mile-an-hour fastballs. That's what coaches want. That's what coaches understand, and that ends up kind of working its way backwards to youth leagues that nobody's ever going to teach anybody a knuckleball because there's no market for it. So essentially, it's a way of saying, here's a version of what is intrinsically a great product that has no market. And this is, so this is what one of those things that category design is designed to try to avoid, that you end up building a knuckleball.
doesn't every category have a life cycle? I mean, it rises at some point, maybe it becomes irrelevant, and then you're on to the next category. That doesn't
Well,
mean the category was a failure, does it?
I mean, no, but look, I mean, most of that has to do with technological,
Mm.
advances. I mean, yes, we're not buying rotary dial phones anymore. Um, but in this particular case, there's been no change, and there's no reason. that the product is any worse or any less, effective in the market. It's just the market has decided it doesn't want it.
Right. Right.
And so, and again, it's kind of like the Segway. Here's this product that is intrinsically amazing, and yet people don't know what to do with it. And there's no demand for it. And the last thing you want to do as a startup is build something that has no demand.
We have to end with a happier example than those two. But you have so many good examples in your book. So I encourage everybody to go out and buy this book and take Kevin up on his generous offer for office hours. Um,
Yep.
hopefully we won't flood your office hours. Anything else, Kevin? We good?
That's a no, great conversation, Bob, and
Yeah, as
always
always.
happy to be on.
Thank you so much for joining, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
All right, thanks.